so nice. It's so fucking nice. It's so cool.
Hard time getting their butts to work. Nobody in Congress was going to keep
What do you drive? I drive an electric vehicle. I drive a Porsche Taycan, but like I've said before, if there was a magic bill that was like, if Hasan throws his Porsche Taycan into the fucking bottom of the ocean, we get public transit, I would do it tomorrow. I wouldn't even think about it.
Their jobs if they intentionally made fuel costs go up. This bill is very nearly all carrots for clean energy and just a few sticks for fossil fuels. But I will talk about those sticks now because one of them I love very much. Methane is the most simple carbon-containing molecule, and it is even better at trapping heat than carbon dioxide. Over the short term, it's 80 times better at trapping heat. And as we've moved away from coal and toward natural gas, which is basically just methane, that has been good because methane is a more efficient fuel. You get more heat per carbon dioxide molecule that you release. Except that at every step of the way, methane can leak into the atmosphere. At the wellhead, at the pipeline, at the compressor, at the infrastructure that delivers it to your house, and the facilities that use it. The Methane Emissions Reduction Program provides incentives to fix leaks and acquire more advanced systems for keeping methane from being released. And it also pays for teams to check and see if there are methane leaks and charge increasingly hefty fines to the
I'm remembering a time when the Trump administration was so aggressive with its deregulation in the immediate aftermath of taking over the White House that they literally stopped any kind of like methane capture regulation, and it was so fucking devastating for the environment that it even got like car manufacturers to speak out against it. Like that was how fucked up it was. EPA had to make a rogue account. What? Shouldn't they have to fix the leaks already? How the fuck is that legal? America, baby. What do you mean? Also, it doesn't even fucking matter because what kind of regulatory mechanism do you have to ensure that these people actually follow through on methane leaks? Like and fix them. There's also a racial angle behind lack of public transportation, preventing black criminals to move into the white suburbs. Yes, there is also that. Highways themselves are an adequate tool for redlining. They literally reinforced redlining and separated black suburbs that were underserved deliberately away from white suburbs.
Companies that are releasing this entirely usable, potent greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. Those fines go up and up and up until they generate a fairly significant amount of revenue as it forces these companies to clean up their act. The other sticks against fossil fuels are fairly minor. They reinstate the Superfund tax, which is basically a big pool of money that polluters pay into, and that money is then used to rehabilitate the damage that they do to the environment. It is a super fund. When I was a kid, I thought it was the Superfund program. It's not that. There's also an increase in the percentage of money that the government gets back from oil companies when they take oil and gas off of federal lands. And finally, there's an increase in the cost of holding a lease without developing it. So just having it sit there and not using it, there's an increase in that cost. Both of those are basically ways to disincentivize companies from using federal lands to produce oil and gas. So there are a couple of things to keep fossil fuels a little more under control, but mostly we want their cost to remain steady or even go down as demand for them decreases because the alternatives are just better. But also, weirdly, there's a couple of carrots for fossil fuels. And I would do anything for love. Since we are obsessed with anything and everything that makes us feel bad, if you've heard anything about this bill, you have heard that Joe Manchin, moderate Democrat, forced the inclusion of a few very weird provisions. First, and most frustratingly, he took a few oil and gas leases in Alaska and the Gulf of Mexico that Trump had authorized and then Biden had paused and people have been fighting against for years and was like, you want my name on this? You make those leases happen. It's super weird. It's super frustrating. It's outside of the normal process. No one likes this. Except for, of course, the oil and gas companies and Joe Manchin. And the other thing was basically a way to prevent any president or lawmakers in the next 10 years from banning fossil fuel leases on federal land. And it does this by tying the ability to put clean energy projects on federal land to a requirement to offer leases for oil and gas drilling on other separate federal lands. That's now, awesome. An offered lease is not a sold lease, and a sold lease is not an oil well, but it is still disappointing, kind of gets stuck in your throat, even if modelers show that the overall carbon effectiveness of the bill only goes down by about about 2% because of these provisions. But Manchin, I guess, got what he wanted out of it, which is everyone talking more about how he loves fossil fuels and they're his pretty little baby than the entire rest of the bill. And also, he got to be like one of the title names on the bill, despite being one of...
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, Fango Lives. The oil, in my opinion, the oil and gas leasing won't have much effect since there are already so many leases out there going unused and many new ones are going unsold too. I've been wondering about that a lot because as we saw in this previous like massive inflation, artificial scarcity and inflation caused by OPEC and our also own domestic manufacturers, producers of oil and gas that purposely kept prices high in an effort to increase their profit margins to punish the American people and globally punish people for not purchasing oil at a time when COVID was happening and there wasn't a lot of transportation. We saw that they were not interested in increasing manufacturing regardless when they had the capacity to do so. So part of the reason why I find it really strange is that like public leasing, I feel like has to have an alternative interest. I don't know if the alternative is to like just reinstitute it for something different down the line. I don't even know if there are provisions that stop them from doing such a thing. Okay, supply of leases increases, demand keeps going down, leases get cheaper, more wells. Yeah, but they're not even doing that. So that's what I don't understand. I don't know if like the reason for why they're doing it is like there has to be another reason for it. You know what I mean? Are they going to reappropriate it for something different? Can they even do that? I don't know, but that's what I've been thinking about a lot as well. Are they just purchasing federal land or have the capacity to purchase federal land for oil and gas initiatives without actually, or for wells, without actually having any interest in drilling it specifically so that doesn't go to renewable energy? Will they then create a secondary market for the growing? Will they create a secondary market for the growing renewable energy industry so that they can maintain their profit margins by reselling the leases that they now maintain back to the renewable energy industry once that becomes the main energy provider? I don't know. Give land back to the indigenous people. Maybe that's why they're buying it, so they can give it back to the indigenous people. Yeah, no, they're not doing that. That's one reason why they're not doing that. They're definitely. I can tell you that they're not doing that to do land back. Okay. All I can think is either a land grab to steal land from the government, or they're going to pump production when green energy takes off. Maybe, I don't know. There is tribal funding in the bill. It's something. I know. There's also $60 billion, I believe, according to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. There is about $60 billion for environmental justice investments in communities disproportionately harmed by climate change and pollution. For those of you who say, oh, well, that's just lip shit. No, that's actually a desperate measure that is absolutely a necessity for survival. We have time and time again covered this aspect. The environmental justice aspect, the racist aspect of drilling, and the toxic chemicals that you release into areas that have no way to push back because they have no power, they have no voice, they are poor. Poorer neighborhoods have higher chances, a higher likelihood of developing cancer for that reason. This is money that will go directly into underserved communities that will be able to rebuild. Hawaii is a great example of this too. I mean, that was the military, but more in that. So, environmental justice funds all the time, and it helps remediate areas without big money. Yeah, Louisiana, the entire fucking state, is a great example of this. I mean, everywhere in the United States of America, every reservation in the United States of America has been long dicked by energy production because they don't do it in the backyard of a fucking oil baron. They're never going to do that there because they know, hey, I don't want to fuck up my water supply. I don't want toxic pollutants everywhere. I don't want my children to grow up in an area where area that's called Cancer Valley, right? Yeah. I don't want my children to be playing in a fucking pond that has toxic waste dumped into it. Yeah, the poor people end up getting the short end of that stick. So it's not just minorities, Chad. It's anywhere that's poor. Exactly. But oftentimes it ends up disproportionately affecting, marginalized communities, obviously.
One of its biggest opponents. So now the right question to ask is all of this going to work? And luckily, I have prepared for you more squares. Each one of these is roughly 5 million fewer tons of CO2, and by 2030, there are 200 of them. So that's roughly 1 billion fewer tons of carbon dioxide per year. Here's where we'll be. Decreased CO2 in transportation saves us 280 million tons per year. Cleaner power generation saves us 360 million tons. Cleaner industry saves us 130 million. Cleaner buildings save us around 70 million tons. Same for the equivalent carbon dioxide effects of mostly methane, but also other greenhouse gases produced by cars like nitric oxides. And finally, carbon sequestration in agricultural and forest lands gets us a final 80 million tons. And of course, we do not pause there. The effects of these changes are projected to get us down another 500 million tons by 2035. I'm aware that there are going to be people who are going to be mad at me for being pretty unapologetically excited about this bill. Like, I'm mad that we lost the Civilian Climate Corps, which would have been thousands of young people working on the ground on these problems. I am frustrated that we lost a lot of due process on these oil leases, and they weren't even something that I was actively working on, so I can't imagine what it must be like for the people who've been fighting those battles. Look, I don't know if it's that I'm old now, or that I'm privileged in like 1,000 ways, or that I've been through a number of climate fights that went very badly. Or maybe I'm just thinking practically about the fact that this might be our last chance to get something substantial done for years, like many years maybe, especially because there was every likelihood that this could.
For the record, that was, what were those blocks? Those blocks were what? 5 million tons, right? Every single one of these blocks is 5 million tons, right? I just want to point something out right now really quickly that will probably doom pill you a little bit further, even though I know Hank hates that. But, here is where the vast majority of our carbon emissions come from. First and foremost, it's almost 2 billion, billion with a B, not million, 2 billion metric tons in 2017 were coming from transportation. And the vast majority of those emissions came from driving passenger vehicles. So a gigantic swath up to 1 billion tons, not million, 1 billion tons of emissions is coming directly from individual car culture. People driving around in their own vehicles when they could very easily be able to reduce traffic density and if we had adequate public transit, greatly reduce the carbon emissions that are coming from driving individual vehicles. Small price to pay for freedom, baby. That's right. Hell yeah. Okay. Each one of those rows is 100 million. That's significant. Wait, where the fuck was this? Okay. Yeah, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So yeah, this entire thing in and of itself is basically the carbon emission created by personal use cars in 1 year.
Cars like nitric oxides. And finally, carbon sequestration in agricultural and forest lands gets us a final 80 million tons. And of course, we do not pause there. The effects of these changes are projected to get us down another 500 million tons by 2035. I'm aware that there are going to be people who are going to be mad at me for being pretty unapologetically excited about this bill. Like, I'm mad that we lost the Civilian Climate Corps, which would have been thousands of young people working on the ground on these problems. I am frustrated that we lost a lot of due process.
Why do you act like you care about the environment when you talk shit about farting Teslas? Don't you own car? I do own car. Damn, bro, you fucking got me. I'm a hypocrite. Streamer man, you own car. Well, I own an electric vehicle, which I don't even think is like genuinely putting a dent in this personally. But I do own an EV at least. But having said that, like I mentioned, I am perfectly happy with better public transit. Okay, that's like I've said time and time again. If there was a magic solution, I could just like fucking light my car on fire, and then tomorrow we had better public transit in Los Angeles, a better grid, I would be on board with that.
Yes, on these oil leases, and they weren't even something that I was actively working on, so I can't imagine what it must be like for the people who've been fighting those battles. Look, I don't know if it's that I'm old now, or that I'm privileged in like 1,000 ways, or that I've been through a number of climate fights that went very badly. Or maybe I'm just thinking practically about the fact that this might be our last chance to get something substantial done for years, like many years maybe, especially because there was every likelihood that this could have just not happened, like many other parts of the original Build Back Better didn't happen. In fact, 4 measly weeks ago, it seemed like it wouldn't happen. I got to talk to Jesse Jenkins about that.
Why do all your ways of getting rid of your car have to be so bad for the environment, dropping it in the ocean, lighting it on fire? Well, that's the joke. That's why.
I was on vacation with my family, or leaving for vacation, and I got the call from Senator Schumer's staff that the bill was dead. Same phases of grief, right? Shock, loss, anger. And some people stopped at anger and they just got mad at Joe Manchin on the internet and yelled at, got cynical like you were talking about. And some of us, including some members of, a handful of members of the Senate, again said, no, this is not how it's going to end. I refuse to accept that. So this is also bargaining, right? That's one of the phases of grief. And we went back to work and we bargained, and it, against all odds, it worked. I had pretty well given up hope that it was going to succeed at that point, given that this is the second time the rug was pulled out from under us. I wanted to be able to tell my kids that we fought to the very end, and it worked. And I am so grateful. I'm going to tear up a little for all the people really that did that, because it was very, very.
Are those billions of personal transportation carbon emissions, including like celebrity jets? I don't think so, even though I do think that now with like our K-shaped recovery and like the wealthy getting incredibly profoundly wealthier in the aftermath of COVID or during COVID, and the income gap widening, right? And the wage gap widening and the wealth gap widening, that disparity has created a system where like a lot of celebrities are basically just fucking chartering private jets and shit. But even that in and of itself does not fucking put a dent in the carbon emissions caused by a disgusting, abhorrent industry that should not exist. I am, of course, talking about, and some of you already know this, cruise ships, okay? If there was an opportunity to take every cruise ship and just fucking nuke them into space, I would do it. I would put all the Republicans in it first, but then I would also fucking, and all the executives of cruise ships, and I would just fucking fly them out to space. No reason for it. Absolutely makes no sense. It is it's just disgusting. One cruise ship causes as much carbon emissions as the entire continent of fucking Europe and its cars, okay? That's insane. The fact that it still exists, the fact that this industry has to exist is mind-boggling to me, okay? Mind-boggling. You are shipping it with whom? Yeah, it's just like, not true, that stat is misquoted. Right, really? I thought it was, well, regardless, it still is a fuckload, okay? It is a boatload. It is a ton of toxic pollutants. It's a ton of fucking... It should not have existed. In the aftermath of COVID, we had an opportunity to just fucking finally strike the end blow into cruise ships, which are also, the greatest way to transmit diseases globally. It's awesome. It's great. I think it's 1 million cars, not the entirety of EU. Okay, well, Your demented grandparents can be made to believe that they're on a cruise ship on land, okay? They don't need to do syphilis parties on the fucking cruise ship. They can do it in Florida, which is kind of like one big cruise ship. Just let them do it in Florida. Why do they have to be on a cruise ship? Make it feel for them like they are on a fucking cruise ship. It's easy. They have dementia anyway, okay? They don't know any better. Be like, yeah, grandma, you're going on a boat. It's going to be so much fun, okay? No, let them do it. And then the boat is Florida. Okay? And then what we can do is take every Filipino which is like, 98% of the cruise ship industry is exploited Filipino workers. We turn them into the Maoist brigade, and then the Philippines become a Maoist nation, a Maoist third worldist nation. Okay, Pinoy gang. One mid-sized cruise ship has the emission of 1 million cars is still a literal fuck ton. Yeah. Like, I shit on cars a lot, but remember that, like, 1 million cars still has practical utility, whereas cruise ships do not. Yeah.
Very close to failure.
I don't harbor any illusions that I live in a perfect world or a perfect country or that perfect legislation exists. There are 330 million of us. The fact that we get anything done at all is a little impressive. And over the last 10 years, we have made tremendous strides in cutting carbon emissions, and that has been in large part because of government investment in the US and elsewhere. Between 2009 and 2017, America spent around $20 billion per year fighting climate change. Over the next 10 years, we will spend $80 billion per year. There are a lot of super powerful people who have been working really hard this whole time to slow this down as much as they can. At first, they say it doesn't exist. Then they say it's not caused by people. Then they say it's caused by people, but it's not that big of a deal. Then they say it's that big of a deal, but the costs to take it on are too great. We have hit them with reality at every step in that process, and we are going to hit them with reality at this step of the process too. They will tell us that the costs are too great, and after we prove to them that it's not, they will tell us that it's too late. Nothing gets done if you don't believe it can't be done. And I, for the first time in decades of this, have started to believe that it can be done. And it's happening, I think, for two reasons. One, because of the very hard work of a lot of people, from policy to science to communication and outreach. And two, because it is getting hard to ignore the very real effects of all of this extra energy in our atmosphere and in our oceans. We might be in a very narrow window here, a moment when the effects are too present for anyone to ignore anymore, but not so present that they will hold us back from implementing solutions. I don't know how long that window is going to be open, and I was not sure that it was open until somebody did something and said something, and they kept working, and they kept pushing, and they kept making the case that this needed to be done until it got done. But now it feels like the window's open. It does not feel like we are done. One big step does not get you over the mountain pass. There is much more to do, but as I've been saying, I am more optimistic now that this is a challenge that we can actually take on than I have been maybe in my entire career. John, I'll see you on Tuesday. Heads up.
I can't stand this lib propaganda. There's literally kids in chat falling for it. I mean, he's not wrong. Okay? There are two different ways to look at this, okay? He recognizes that it's inadequate, right? He's just a little bit more positive about it. And obviously, when you are living in a reality where, like, good things seem unimaginable, even if you have, like, a minor minor push in the right direction, I think people are going to make a bigger deal out of that. Anyway, here are some of the good stuff that AOC is claiming is in the Inflation Reduction Act. It'll create up to 9 million new jobs in clean energy, in clean manufacturing, environmental protection, and green transportation. Seems a little Green New Deal-y to me. I don't know. It seems like communism. It's kind of fucked up. Reduce annual utility costs by an average of $1,025 by lowering fuel and electricity costs and improving energy efficiency. Dedicate about $60 billion for environmental justice investments in communities disproportionately harmed by climate change and pollution. We already mentioned that. Cut emissions by roughly 40%. Here are some of the healthcare wins in it. Allow Medicare to directly negotiate prescription drug prices, starting with 10 drugs beginning in 2023. Cap insulin to $35 for those with Medicare coverage. Limit Medicare out-of-pocket costs to $2,000 per year, and extend healthcare insurance subsidies to lower costs. Unfortunately, it did not feature a provision that would allow you to be able to strap an executive at your insurance company that you are a part of onto a spaceship and fly them directly into Mars when they refuse to, offer you the network coverage that they claimed you would be able to get. So that's a bummer. That's what I would have added if I was a part of the legislative team behind this bill. So So that's a bit of an F. Okay, that's a bit of an L. Healthcare wins. Allow Medicare. Allow Medicare to directly negotiate. We talked about that. Extend health insurance subsidies to lower costs. Tax fairness wins. Provide funding for the IRS to go after wealthy tax evaders. Institute a 15% minimum tax rate on the wealthiest corporations. Impose a 1% tax on stock buybacks used to enrich wealthy shareholders. That's a wild one. But anyway, despite Republican lies, there are no new taxes on family making $400,000 or less and no new taxes on small businesses. Okay? We will not stop fighting for universal child care and pre-K housing, immigration justice, Medicare coverage expansion, and comprehensive climate solutions. But let's be clear, we succeeded in making the president's agenda a more progressive agenda. The minor dub.